Hi, my name's Adele Slouzis. I'm the Visual Arts Curator here at The Mill, a multi-arts organisation based in Garniata, Adelaide. I'm here today with artist Yana Lay. Hello, Yana.
Hi, Adele.
And we're going to be having a chat about her Sala exhibition, Face Up. To start with, can you tell me a little bit about your practice? And I know you're a student at the moment and you've been a studio artist here at The Mill for a little while. So how did you come to be an artist?
So I had been drawing pretty much my entire life until I hit my 20s. And then throughout my 20s, I tried to get a real job, that old chestnut, and eventually came to the conclusion that the concessions I was told I'd have to make if I were to become an artist, I was making anyway. So I may as well do what I want to. But the drive was always there. And deep down, everything I did was motivated by the desire to be able to follow my art. When I gave myself permission to call myself an artist, or rather to prioritise that. So I did that at a relatively late age, around 30, 31, which is how I ended up starting my studies and also seeking out this place.
So you're a student at the moment at Adelaide Central School of Art, which is actually where the seed of this exhibition started to develop.
The seed, I suppose, was my growing existential dread about the climate crisis. It happened to fit into Life Drawing 2, which was the subject that I did this in. I actually had a whole different project that I had already made quite a start in, and then I changed my mind quite suddenly. We had gone on a field trip to the Art Gallery of South Australia, and Chris Orchard, who was the teacher for that particular subject, went, "All right, just go and have a look around, make some sketches. We'll meet again in 2 hours. Yeah, let's do that." And so I did that. I sketched the faces of various portraits that I saw. And I found myself drawing a lot of the not necessarily happy ones, and I found a similar thread in all of them. I think this was after I had attended the protests, the climate protest in September last year. And there was a moment there when I was taking photos and documenting that I had that thing happen where the selfie camera is accidentally facing towards you, and I could see the face that I was making, which was sort of very pinched and bloody-minded, and I noticed that everyone around me was making that same face. And I was seeing that again at the art gallery. The thing that I really noticed was that a lot of the faces that I sketched that day were fed up. The thing that first made me aware of climate activists other than Greta Thunberg was a meme. It just listed 3 others, notably Xyezca Martinez, Isra Hirsi, and Autumn Peltier. And for the most part, there was again that shared facial expression. Now, Chris Orchard encouraged us to take an interest in a small detail, I suppose, and just really work it into a big thing. So I went with facial expressions. Chris Orchard has, for example, taken a great interest in the curve of a particular man's cranium. So facial expression is almost quite a complex thing by comparison. No, not almost. It is a complex thing. Mm-hmm. So I made this switch to these portraits. That semester was built on us choosing a set of mentor artists, as it were. The relevant one in my case here being Cherry Hood, who does these very emotive portraits of young people in watercolour, oversized, quite drippy in style, so Gravity does a lot of the work. And it was originally my plan to let that happen. It didn't work out that way. I just focused on the facial expression aspect of it. And in a way, it was just, it was nice that I was starting to get a little bit of freedom in what to do for my assignments, because this is second year, so we aren't told precisely what we have to do. We're not as limited. So I could choose to do portraiture for life drawing. I could choose to use watercolour. So a lot of that was just me enjoying that freedom. So previous large watercolours had me sticking the paper to the floor so it could puddle and allow the mixed colours to just split apart again. That's actually one of the things I really love about watercolour, that your chromatic greys just split back into rainbows. So that was a thing I almost deliberately didn't do with this lot. Instead of allowing it to be very drippy and direct, it just became very layered. A thing that happened almost by accident, I suppose, was that I learned that the medium is more forgiving than you think. So certainly with the first one, there was a lot of erasing and redoing and just moving things back and forth. So in the first one that I did, that was my first attempt at Szitezkat. He had his hair over his shoulder. And I ended up changing my mind and scrubbing it all out. And Chris Orchard actually saw that. And so I did the scrubbing out during homework time and then brought it into class. And Chris saw that and went, "How did you do that?" My answer being brute force and bloody ignorance. It ended up being a case of a lot of layering and a lot of correcting mistakes. I remember at one point going, oh, this is going too smoothly. There's not a lot of that heavy working, not a lot of that correction happening. So for a little while I was thinking, you know what? Perhaps I need to make mistakes so that I can correct them. There is a certain power in just the working of the layers and changing your mind. It's frustrating. It's made me suffer for some of the pieces, but I think they've also ended up being the better ones. So I don't know if that's a physical thing or if that's just something that happened because I became invested in them and started to see them in more detail.
I think, and I mean, looking at the work behind you, which is one of the later portraits that you have done, when you talk about that layering and, you know, making mistakes and going over them again and highlighting areas and pushing other ones back.
Case in point.
Yeah, this one is a
God.
really clear vision of that. And it is really different to those earlier portraits that you did, which are the ones that we'll see in the gallery. But in this work, you know, because of the scale, we really see those little details that you might not see on a smaller portrait, and you can zoom in and it's like there's, you know, 100 different paintings within this one painting where there's this beautiful detail and highlighting and gesture and depth. I mean, there's a certain physicality of working on them, which I think is maybe one of the things that draws you to them as well. But for the viewer, standing in front of a face this size has this power, and you talked to me a little bit about how you felt that sometimes climate activists who are young are overlooked because of their age and even made to seem not as important because of that. But giving them this scale, you can't not look at them and you can't not respect them. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, and that actually brings us to an issue in its own right, because this here, to make them so big, it's kind of a problematic act, really, because I'm putting them on a pedestal in a big way. And these are utterly overworked people, and we are just allowing this vast problem to rest on their shoulders. Everyone is doing a different part of the job, which is important because it's a multifaceted problem and it needs to be approached from many different angles. Also, very importantly, Greta, being white and very privileged, isn't as directly affected by climate change as a lot of the others, because most of them are from minority communities. A lot of them are Indigenous. And there is that whole disproportionate thing of how those least responsible bear the most of the consequences.
I know that you have attended protests in Adelaide, and also I feel like that this body of work is actually a form of activism. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the power that you see in art having in this movement and what your contribution is.
Well, I don't know. To me, that feels like I'd be getting a bit high and mighty. I guess the thing about art is that it's such an intrinsically qualitative thing that it's hard to quantify how it makes a difference. I mean, we can hope that it is part of a cultural shift. And I suppose an exhibition like this one might help put us into context. But will this exhibition make a tangible difference? I don't know. Maybe if somebody's inspired to take some sort of action, even if it's just changing their superannuation fund or something, perhaps. Hard to say.
I think there's this levity in what you're doing, and I know you talked about not wanting to put these people on pedestals, but it's also drawing attention to them, and in a way that our audiences to the gallery and the people watching this video may not have heard of all of these activists before, and it might spark that little bit of attention that they would then go down a climate activist rabbit hole in a similar way that you have.
I hope so. I hope so.
I'm really looking forward to seeing this body of work in the gallery space, because I think it's going to be really arresting. I think that when you stand in the middle of the gallery and look around at all of these almost looming portraits, it's going to have an effective experience for the viewer. And I think that can be, quite profound, but also links into maybe that experience of being at a climate rally where you are surrounded by people who have this sort of like vision, bloody mindedness, I think you've been calling it. That there's power in that. So
yes, it's going to be interesting to see them all together, because not even I have seen them all at the same time. It's only have been 1, 2 at most that were out at the same time. So it's it's likely to be an intense experience.